Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I am Simply G, and today I'm going to be talking about all of the manga reading challenges that I was able to complete over the second quarter of 2019. This is in relation to MangaHoarder's Read Manga 2019 challenge. She does this every single year where she puts out a list of 52 different challenges plus some bonus challenges in hopes to encourage people to read more manga or to expand their manga reading as well. There's a lot of different ways you can do this challenge. How I personally like to do it is with a single series or catching up to a single series per challenge. Usually I prefer them to be completed series or completed books, so I have read the entirety by that point in the time. But you know, there's some here and there that are just ongoing or I've just started that I feel fit this challenge more. So yes, the last time I did one of these videos, it was very, very long. This one shouldn't be nearly as long because there's not nearly as many series to talk about. But rather than spend too long on this intro, I'm just gonna go straight ahead, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first up is challenge number 5, which is a 4-panel comedy manga. My choice for this was Fullmetal Alchemist, the complete 4-panel comics. This is, of course, the 4-panel comics from the very popular, much beloved shonen manga Fullmetal Alchemist. This is a newer release from Viz, just collecting all of these 4-panel comics from the manga and various other things, DVDs, things like that Arakawa put out, because these are not included, unfortunately, in the Full Metal editions of the re-release manga. And I'm buying those editions, and I do love me some Full Metal, so this was sort of a no-brainer to pick up. If you're not familiar with 4-panel comics, really it's in the name. But they're comics that are only 4 panels, and they're comedic, so there's like a start, a setup to a joke, punchline, and then reaction. They're fairly straightforward, nothing too complicated about them, but I find that Arakawa's humor works very, very well in a 4-panel format. I mean, her humor works anyway, but I do think that there's some very inspired pieces of comedy in her 4-panel comics, and I absolutely adore this particular book. So yeah, really was a no-brainer for me to pick up this one, and really happy that we did actually get these books in English, or these comics in English, I should say, because the manga without them, I mean, they're not a necessity, but it would have still been a shame if we hadn't had them in this newer release. Next is challenge number 11, which is a josei manga, so a manga that is written specifically for an adult female audience. I read a lot of josei, but one of the more recent ones that I picked up and that I read was the single volume of Maiden Railways by Asumiko Nakamura. This is a collection of short stories, short love stories surrounding trains and train stations. It's so good, you guys. I love Nakamura's work. I think she's wonderful. You may be familiar with her newer release, in English, that is, of Classmates. She has a lot of stuff that has been released. I mean, she's very prolific mangaka in Japan, but we don't have a huge amount of her stuff in English. The only thing aside from this, and aside from Classmates that I can think of now, is Utsubora. She also has a short story in the Neo Parasite F anthology, but she is incredibly good at what she does. Each of the stories in this collection are fairly different, but they all have this same very heartwarming feeling to them, and they complement each other very, very well. You can understand all of these different individuals and where they are in their life. Really, really, really recommend this one. Denpa Books put this one out. It was one of their first licenses, and one of the few of their books that I've actually picked up. I am following quite a few of their series, but a lot of them haven't been released yet, so I am hopeful for the future for them, and they're very, very good. I'm very, very impressed with their current library of licenses. But if you haven't tried this and you want to try a josei and you don't really know where to start, you don't want to invest in a huge amount of books or anything either, this is a really good starting point. As I said, it's self-contained, and Nakamura's work is very interesting, very unique, but really universally appealing. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful little book, and really happy to have it. And yeah, kind of a no-brainer for my choice for this one as well, because as I said, I do read a lot of josei manga, but a lot of the newer ones have just completed last year, or I didn't start them this year, or they haven't come out yet. So the timing just wasn't really right on a lot of the probably more popular, well-known ones. But yes, this one is definitely worth the look, even if you're not really a josei fan. Next is challenge number 12, which is an out-of-print manga. I don't actually have a huge... I mean, I do have out-of-print manga in my collection, of course. But again, I don't buy it on a very regular basis, so I haven't read a huge amount of it recently. So really the one that came to mind when I was thinking about titles for this challenge was Maki Kusumoto's Dolis. This is a old Tokyopop title. As you can see, it is another josei. Very interesting little book, this one. Not necessarily for the faint of heart, but really beautifully printed. As you can see, it's got these color flats to them, and it's just done in a really interesting, unique way. This is the story of a very, I want to say, destructive and toxic relationship between two people because of how, like, obsessed within themselves and with each other they become, and how harmful that is. It's definitely a story like of love lost, and a warning for people. It's not your typical, you know, fall in love type of story, and even within josei it is a little bit sharper in the sense that there's no happy ending here. It's not meant to be a feel-good type of story or any sort of wish fulfillment even. Yeah, it's one that isn't like, it's not that hard to track down. I'm sure you can still find it semi okay for a decent price. Yeah, it's not super duper rare, but I wouldn't expect it's in huge demand either. So if you are wanting a copy, it might be an idea to track it down now rather than wait for it in the future, because I don't know how prolific it is out there. But obviously it is out of print, so it is, you know, you're not going to get necessarily a new copy. But it is, yeah, you know, if you can find it for a decent price, I wouldn't pay more, like too much more than just retail price for this book, especially because it is so thin and it's not going to be nearly everybody's taste. It is definitely one that is for a specific audience, and so I can't really recommend it out of hand, but it is very good at what it does. It's one of the few really well done Tokyopop titles. You can see how much care went into it. And yeah, I was happy to read it. I've been wanting to track it down for a long time. And yeah, I'm happy that I was able to find it for a relatively decent price secondhand. And now with Tokyopop back in publishing, Again, I'm still a little bit wary about that, but I do hope that we see some more interesting titles like this kind coming from them, because right now a lot of their catalog isn't something I'm super keen on, and that may change in the future. We'll have to see. Next for prompt 22 is a thriller or mystery manga, and my choice was Total Eclipse of the Eternal Heart by Sunday. This is a BL title, very different from Sunday's other work, which is Go for Nakamura, about a teenage boy who keeps having dreams of the past and a mysterious individual he calls Sensei who keeps strangling him. And yeah, there's a lot of very curious things in this manga. There is a lot more sexual elements to it, a lot more violence. This is a very twisted love story, and it's not one I could readily recommend to people who are sensitive to a lot of this stuff, who don't like creepy things or gory things or anything that is too high tension. But considering it's a BL manga, it honestly functions incredibly well as a horror or a thriller book. It doesn't just use like that type of theming as a gimmick. It's integral to the plot, and I really, really appreciate Sunday's work for that. I enjoyed this book a lot. I also enjoyed Go for It Nakamura a lot. So, two very different books, but it obviously showed their range, and I am very keen to read more of their manga if we ever get it. So yes, this is a little bit of an unusual one. I'm sure it's not one that a lot of people would put on this list, or at least for this challenge, because there's a lot of horror manga coming out currently, or mystery manga, thriller manga. But this is the one that I've read most recently, and it absolutely impressed me. Could not ask for more from this book. And honestly, I do hope that we see maybe a longer series from Sunday, because I do wonder what they could do with more than one volume to work with. Challenge number 23 is an OEL manga, or a original English language manga. This is technically not original English language manga, but it still kind of works. It's a manga inspired or manga style comic that wasn't originally written in Japanese. This one was originally written in German. It has now been translated to English, and this is one of the newer Tokyo Pop titles in my collection, and that is Star Collector. This is by Anna B. and Sophie Schonhammer, and it's a BL title about two teenage boys and sort of stargazing. They're two very different personalities, as is generally the case, and their unlikely friendship relationship that develops. It's only 2 volumes. The second volume, I'm not sure if it's out yet. It's supposed to be out. I haven't been able to find it anywhere. But it's very, very good. It's very reminiscent of kind of this style of BL. It's very, very similar to a lot of the stuff that has been released lately. So if you're enjoying things like that, or if you're a BL fan, this won't feel out of place in your collection whatsoever. It really does feel just like a general BL manga. And I think, unfortunately, original English language manga does get a bad rap a lot of the time, because there's this perception that some manga can only be Japanese, or the stories, the way the comics function are very inherently Japanese. And I don't really disagree with that, but at the same time, I'm not going to completely judge an entire type of inspired work just because it's not Japanese, because there is some original English language manga that is really good. Some really talented people who have been inspired by anime and manga, and who are now trying to write their own. And whilst I wouldn't call them mangaka like I would with a Japanese manga creator, I do applaud their efforts, and I do think that there's some very high quality stuff that they put out. I do think that there is an important distinction between original English language manga and just manga, but that's not to say that OEL manga is inherently bad. There are some that's not so great, but there's some that is very good. And strangely enough, Tokyopop now, as well as in the past, has always been sort of at the forefront of this movement of trying to get local creators published. Now I don't actually like how Tokyopop went about doing that, but now we're seeing more of this happening thanks to Viz as well. They have various programs trying to encourage OEL manga and submissions, and I think Kodansha and Seven Seas also put out some non-Japanese manga-inspired comics, or at least are looking for submissions. So yeah, that's an interesting little thing. As I said, there's goods and bads. This one is definitely on the good side, and I do want to finish it. It has very good reviews from the original German as well. So yeah, I hope to finish it because I want to get. It's only 2 volumes, and volume 2 is supposed to be out, but it just hasn't come out, or it wasn't released, at least where I could find it. I don't know. I'll have to do some digging, but yeah, if you're curious about it, if you don't mind OEL, if you don't mind BL, and if you're willing to take a gamble on a Tokyopop title, especially because this one's really, like, it's only 2 volumes, and I'm pretty sure the second volume's come out, so you're not going to be left hanging with an out-of-print, incomplete title, then check this one out. But, you know, it isn't necessarily one for everyone. Next, for prompt 29, which is a manga that features music or art, I chose a digital title, so I'm not going to just show off my tablet like I did in the last video. I'm just going to overlay the cover, but I chose Beck, or Beck Mongolian Chop Squad, which is a manga about music, rock and roll music, in fact. And this is a 34-volume series. It's been released in its entirety digitally, thanks to Kodansha. It had previously gotten a somewhat physical release from Tokyopop, but only the first 11 or 12 volumes, so obviously nowhere near completed. And it's one of the titles that is actually available through the Comixology Unlimited program, so I read the entirety of the manga without paying for it, because I have Amazon Prime. I could just borrow it and then return it. But you can buy it as well if you're wanting to support the series. It is really, really good, and I am actually planning on purchasing it in the future once it goes on sale. But it is a manga about a high school boy in Japan who is kind of a loser. He doesn't really have any goals or ambitions or anything he wants to do with his life. And he, one day, is almost attacked by the titular Beck, who's this weird Frankensteinian patchwork of a dog. And so he's almost attacked by this dog, but then he meets this dog's owner, who is this other boy, a couple years older than him, who is a bit of an odd duck. He's Japanese, but he's very recently returned to Japan, or it might be even his first time in Japan. He's spent most of his life, if not all of his life, in the US, so his Japanese isn't good at all. He doesn't really have any worries about respect or societal politeness or anything like that. He's very American, is basically what I'm trying to say. And so for our main character, this is like such a breath of fresh air. It's something new and weird and just a new perspective he'd never had. And through this other guy and through his sister as well, the 2 siblings he meets, he discovers a love for rock and roll, and most importantly for a specific band called Dying Breed, who is actually friends with these 2 that he's met. But now he's wanting to learn guitar. He's found something that he really enjoys and wants to do, and the whole manga is following their they're building a band and trying to gain popularity and becoming like a proper rock band and not just some dinky little garage band hoping for a break. They've got a lot of wishes to hit it on an international stage, on a stage that will be remembered in the future, and yeah, again, an international force rather than just being like a Japanese presence. It's really, really, really well done if you like rock and roll, if you like rock history, if you like rock music, of all types. If you're just like a music fan, definitely check this one out. It is harder because for me, I always prefer to watch the anime when it comes to a music-based series. This one is no different. I had seen the anime previously. It's very good. It's not my favorite, but and I would say that the manga is like way, way better. I got way more invested with the manga, but it is still a very good series. It's been a long time since I've seen the anime, so it might be time for a rewatch. And curiously, a lot of people regard both the dub and the dubbed songs to be a lot better than just the Japanese version of the show. So that might be a way for you to watch it, even if you're not necessarily a fan of dubs. But yeah, it was nice to actually finish this series and read it in its entirety, thanks to Kodansha's efforts. It's a story that I've really, really grown to love. Haruo Takeuchi's work. One of his other titles, one that is currently coming out, again from Kodansha digitally, is Seven Shakespeares. And that one is like very different setting, very different type of story. But that was actually the first of his manga that I'd read, and I quickly fell in love with it. It's a little bit more my speed, a little bit more my interest, but it made it hopping to this series a little bit easier. And as I said, I'd seen Beck before. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it wasn't like my favorite thing. But I will say that the manga is very, very, very good, and I highly recommend it, especially if you enjoyed the anime. More so if you might not have even really liked the anime. So yeah, it is very good. It's not, I don't know if it's going to be for everyone, but I do think there's a lot in it to love. And as I said, if you are invested in music, and if you're a rock and roll fan, if you know a lot about rock history and just all of these things, then you're definitely going to enjoy it, because you can fan out along with a lot of these characters. There's a lot, and it's very, very well researched. There's a lot of very iconic venues and musicians mentioned and starred almost. So yeah, definitely give it a look-see, and thank Kodansha for their efforts in giving us this wonderful series in its entirety. Challenge number 34 is a manga that features an LGBT plus character, with the bonus of that it's written by a LGBT plus author or artist. So for both of those, I decided, kind of a no-brainer for me, to choose Our Dreams at Dusk, Shimanami Tasogare by Yuki Kamitani, who is a non-binary, asexual mangaka. So a lot of themes about identity and community and place and finding yourself are within all of their manga. But this is such a beautiful story. I've said it numerous times in regards to the series. I absolutely adore this manga, and it's really a beautiful story, and the type of LGBT manga that I want to see more of in English is honestly probably the perfect example of how to do everything right. And it is so refreshing that it does have representation for everyone within the community. Now, I've said this before, I'm not actually part of the LGBT community, and I am very fortunate in that I've never felt ostracized for my sexuality, my gender, but even though I'm not part of the community doesn't mean that I don't enjoy reading LGBT stories, and I value stories for what they are. I value characters for who they are, And this is just such a perfect example of how a story can really go above and beyond and bring in readers that maybe don't have the personal connection to the story and the character arc than other individuals might, but still be very valuable and very relevant and very, very empathetic to them. But, you know, my words really don't mean a lot when you compare it to other individuals within the manga community who are part of the LGBT community, who do have so many wonderful things to say about this series, to say about how it makes them remember how they felt finding a community for themselves and finding their own place and people who understand them, and the importance of that. And that's one of the largest themes within this manga, is about finding that safe community, those people who will understand you, and not just like having to struggle through things on your own. It's very interesting. I mean, Kamatani's work is beautiful. Everything they do has so much genuine emotion to it. It's so very authentic that it does just attach itself to you, regardless of who you are. And it's the fact that it's only 4 volumes, it's done in such a superb way. It's the quintessential LGBT manga, in my opinion. I do hope we see more and more of this type of manga coming to English, because not only with this particular story, but there's a lot of stories like this, I'm sure, in Japanese that do deserve a wider audience in English, and who I think there's a lot of people in English-speaking countries that can gain a lot from reading them, whether that be reassurance or insight or whatever. It's definitely, one that everyone, I think, should read, regardless of sexual orientation or gender. I've gushed so long I haven't even said what it's about. It's basically, the story is about a high school boy who has, I believe, he feels like he's been outed at school as being gay, and he is contemplating suicide, but thankfully does not go through with it. After he sees someone who he also thinks is committing suicide, he runs to help them, and this individual, someone, has said, no, don't worry about it. And then they sort of strike up this conversation, someone says, I'm eating this popsicle, and I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to do anything or judge you, but you can speak to me. And so he basically, pours his heart out to them. And then he follows them to this rest house, which contains a lot of different people, this smaller community of people who restore old houses, abandoned places, and make them into new public spaces, including this rest house, this lounge that he's shown up in. And all of them are part of the LGBT community. So again, there's this larger metaphor of, healing and building yourself up, and again, this idea of the renovation and creating something new and creating something, or giving something old a new value, and giving it a new value in the perspective of the community as well, and finding your place and working through your own problems, smashing through them and building up a stronger you. Yeah, it's a very obvious metaphor, but it's done incredibly well, and that's something that most people comment on. There's a lot of very beautiful tricks that aren't inherently unique within Kamatani's writing, but the mix of them is what makes their work so, in my mind, so quintessentially theirs. And yeah, it's beautiful. Obviously it follows several of these characters within this, DIY renovation group, and their stories, their relationships, their struggles with their sexuality, their identity, with their past and their future. Yeah, I mean, there's so much to love with this manga, and I do hope we see more of Kamatani's work. It's sort of a travesty that Nobari no O is the only other one of their works that we have in English, and that is now criminally out of print as well. It's criminally underrated, criminally out of print. I want more people to read it, and I hope we see more of their manga in the future. That would be really, really great. But yes, I've spoken, out of all of these series so far, this is the one I've spoken the longest about, and I think that just says it all, really. Finally, for the reading challenges that I completed in this last quarter, so April, May, June, the prompt, or the challenge, is number 41, a manga over 500 pages. This is in regards to the entire series, which I read. Some of these books I reread, but most of them were a new read for me. And that is number 6. This is a josei sci-fi series set in a dystopic future where there are various, like, enclosed cities and that are like paradise, and then the outside there's a mass of poverty, and there's a lot of secret experimentation. And one day, a young boy within one of these cities he's very smart, top of the class, ahead of the game, very, very highly valued in their society. He opens up his window during a storm. Well, I say window, it's like glass doors, and yells into the storm. And then all of a sudden, another young boy runs into his room and basically tackles him, kind of attacks him. But he's very obviously hurt and in need of assistance, of which our main character, Shion, does. He doesn't really question why there's this curious other boy who's just come into his house and looks like he's been shot and hasn't eaten anything and is possibly like coming down with pneumonia. This other boy is not in a good place. And so he spends the night there pretty much. Well, he patches them up, helps them, falls asleep, and then in the next day, this boy has mysteriously disappeared into the night. He didn't really get who he was, what he was doing. All he knows is the name he gave him, which is Rat. And so they find out, the sort of the government officials of this city find out that he helped a fugitive, and so like all of his privileges are taken away, his family's house is like downgraded, all of this stuff. He's become sort of like the lowest rank in the city now. It has been 10 years, I don't know, it's been a while. But all of a sudden he is being framed for the murder of someone else at his job, of which there's a lot of problems, but he is rescued by this boy, Rat, who has returned, who obviously is also older, and they escape out of the city, out of number 6, which is what the city is called, and into the outer world. And so now they're trying to solve the mystery, the weird sci-fi conspiracy of, the city and the government and all the corruption and what the true purpose is. And yeah, it's an interesting series because it's one that I think a lot of people maybe know because there was an anime for it, but which is unfortunately also out of print and very likely to never come back into print. But this is a very quintessential genre BL or genre LGBT story, because we have both of our main characters are in a romantic relationship somewhat. It's never explicitly said, but you'd have to be pretty thick to not notice it. And the fact that it's sort of like, in my opinion, it's sort of like Yuri on Ice, where that story or that series is first and foremost a sports series, but it has a gay relationship involved in it. This is a sci-fi series with a gay relationship involved with it. We also have a non-binary character with Dog Keeper. And yeah, so there's, you know, there's a lot of going on in here. It's really good. It's amazing to me how much has changed since the anime came out, because I watched the anime as it came out many, many years ago. It was probably like close to a decade ago now. And at the time it was very unpopular. A lot of people like now, but I see it less and less because I'm less just general places of the internet and more so in my curated spots where I don't have to see a lot of vitriol. But it was very unpopular. A lot of people felt kind of sideswiped by the romantic element, even though it was very obvious, and again, you'd have to be quite obtuse not to notice it. But it is a very good, engaging sci-fi mystery. It falls apart a little bit at the end in the anime because it was only 11 episodes, so there was a lot of stuff that they had to pack in. The manga isn't much longer in that it's only a 9-volume series, and it still covers the same amount of stuff. I believe it covers everything that was in the novels. But it's not really a series that has a conclusion, or at least a satisfying conclusion in the anime. I mean, it has a conclusion, but it's very open-ended. The manga is also open-ended, but it has a little bit of an epilogue, which makes it feel a little bit better and a little bit more satisfying. So yeah, as I said, these books they're not 500 pages long, obviously, but the entire series is over 500 pages long. I did read the entire series, so I'm just going to count it. I don't really have a huge amount of omnibuses or anything that are that long, and I didn't really have a huge amount of time to be reading large omnibuses either, so this is my choice for challenge number 41. And it fits. It works. It works. So those were all of the books that I read for the manga reading challenge. Thank you so much to Laura, who always does these every year. Only eight things that I spoke about, but I'm sure this video is horrendously long anyway. Let me know what you've been reading recently, whether you're also doing this challenge, whether or not you've finished a lot of these particular prompts or challenges. With these, I only have a handful left to do. Things like one-word title and hardcover release, award winner, manhwa, and then of course my favorite manga. Some of those I think will be all pretty easy to fulfill, but some of the stuff like battle manga and martial arts manga, mecha manga especially, isekai maybe, might be a little bit more difficult for me to finish, but I have the rest of the year, and that's, you know, the best part of 6 months. So yeah, here's hoping I can finish it. But let me know your guys' thoughts on these titles, whether you've read them, whether you hadn't heard of them, whether you want to check any of them out, or you've read them recently and really liked them or disliked them. I like hearing all of that. But thank you guys so much for watching. I, as always, am Simply G, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye till then.